Do you know about how each candidate for governor in California feels about housing and insurance? Well, after today's video, hopefully you will. California needs 2.5 million homes built in the next 8 years. Meanwhile, insurance companies are leaving the state in record numbers. Did you know that nearly 700,000 homeowners are on California's FAIR Plan, which is the insurer of last resort? Well, by June 2nd, you're going to vote for who's going to tackle these problems next. In today's video, I'm going to break down where each major candidate running for California governor stands on housing and insurance. In this video, I don't want to speak about politics or endorse someone, but rather give you the facts and talk about what each candidate is proposing. The reality is that California's housing shortage is directly affecting home prices, rents, inventory, and whether people can afford to live here or not. And unfortunately, the insurance crisis is just making it worse. Premiums are skyrocketing, policies are getting dropped, and some can't even close on a home because they can't get a policy. The next governor is going to have a huge impact on these issues. Because of this, I went through each major candidate's housing and insurance plans, and in this video, I'm going to simplify it as much as possible and break it down for you. In today's video, we're covering Xavier Becerra, Chad Bianco, Steve Hilton, Matt Mahan, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, and Antonio Villaraigosa. Now let's get into it and talk about topic number 1, which is why this matters. By the way, hi everyone. My name is Alex Epstein, and I'm a lifelong San Franciscan and realtor here in the Bay Area. If you're thinking about buying, selling, investing, or even renting in or near San Francisco, I'd be more than happy to be a resource for you. Please feel free to reach out to me at my contact information below. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get back into the video. Now, I told you earlier that California needs to plan on building 2.5 million homes in the next 8 years. What I didn't tell you is how massively behind we are. In recent history, we have been building about 80,000 homes per year, when in reality, we really need to be building 180,000 homes per year annually. That delta or shortage drives up prices and rents to the point where most first-time home buyers can't even afford to buy a home. Furthermore, that means that there is a lack of inventory and a huge demand for a home when it hits the market. Now let's briefly talk about insurance because that directly affords housing. As I stated earlier, California's FAIR Plan is the state's insurance of last resort. As of March 2026, there are nearly 700,000 homeowners on this plan and nearly $750 billion of exposure. That's gone up drastically over the last few years, and it isn't looking like it's going to get better anytime soon. The state's sustainable insurance strategy is to expand coverage into wildfire distressed areas and get insurers to write policies in higher risk zones that will directly affect 1.5 million homeowners. Here's why this matters for real estate. If you can't get insurance on a home, you likely won't close on a home. Just about every lender requires insurance, and even if you pay in cash, most homeowners want the peace of mind of having insurance. If premiums end up doubling or tripling in price, that affects home affordability just as much as if the purchase price raised. If insurers continue to leave the way that they have been, the FAIR Plan will just become utilized more and more, meaning that it will become more expensive and limited. So in essence, housing production and insurance aren't two separate issues. They're actually deeply connected. You can build all the homes you want, but if no one is going to insure them, that becomes a huge problem. Every candidate knows this, so the question is, what are they going to do about it? Let's start by talking about Xavier Becerra. Becerra has one of the broadest housing agendas in this race. His platform treats the housing shortage as a day one emergency. He aims to create a senior housing delivery team that will directly report to him. One of his focuses is to get 40,000 projects that were already approved across the finish line. His plan includes statewide fee reform with the goal of reducing costs that gets passed on to buyers. He also wants to end what he calls abusive affordable housing mandates that some cities use as a backdoor to kill projects. He's talking about more scalable modular housing, stronger enforcement against cities that ignore housing laws, and using state financing tools and public land to keep projects moving forward when private funding stalls. What I noticed is that his plan is very state-led. He'd like to use enforcement, state resources, public land, and making sure that cities are following through with their obligations. Now on insurance, his platform is less detailed. His campaign does mention insurance as part of the broader affordability crisis. However, I did not find a standalone insurance blueprint on his website. Now I did try to go all out for you guys and research as much as possible, so I did watch the debates. And during the debates, Becerra did mention that he would call a state of emergency. Furthermore, he did say that he would seek a wildfire rate insurance freeze, and he's going to push for more transparency in how insurers price policies. Okay, now moving on to the next candidate, we're going to speak about Chad Bianco. Bianco frames housing mostly as a deregulation problem. His plan calls for faster permitting, expedited project approvals, and the elimination of CEQA. For those of you that don't know, CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. Many candidates will bring this up, and in Bianco's opinion, he says that CEQA drives up costs and delays project through litigation. He also wants statewide incentives for developers, which is an end to what he calls overregulation in the building industry. Regarding Prop 13, which limits property tax increases, Bianco is explicitly opposed to weakening it. His housing theory is pretty straightforward. Sacramento's overregulation is choking home building. His fix is a lighter regulatory environment, faster approvals, and letting developers build without the current layer of delays and extra costs. On insurance, Bianco's pages are shorter but clear. He wants to create a stable yet fair regulatory environment that will stop insurers from leaving the state. He supports incentivizing home hardening against wildfire and flood, creating financial solvency for the California Fair Plan, prosecuting insurance fraud, and simplifying the claim process. His insurance theory mirrors his housing theory, which is that overregulation is the problem. He believes that if you make California a more predictable and less hostile environment, that insurers will come back to the state. Pair that with wildfire hardening and fair plan support, and you stabilize the market. Now let's move on to the next candidate, which is Steve Hilton. Hilton is a huge proponent of building entry-level homes that first-time homebuyers need. His solution is to make starter homes financially viable again. He proposes reducing or deferring fees on starter-level home projects. To do so, he would tie fees to home size so that smaller homes don't have the same burden as larger homes. Furthermore, he would allow fees to be financed over time rather than having to be paid up front. He also wants to eliminate state income tax on profits from construction on starter home projects. Essentially, this is his way to incentivize builders to focus on this segment of the market. He's proposing fast-track approvals for these starter home projects, a governor's housing expediter to cut through red tape, a 5-year freeze on new housing regulations, ADU incentives that act as new entry-level housing supply, and a state-backed starter home loan program that can help with down payment, closing costs, or rate buydowns. His housing program is very targeted. It aims to build starter homes that first-time homebuyers can actually buy and remove the costs and regulatory barriers that exist that make these projects unprofitable. Hilton's insurance plan is one of the clearest in the field. He believes that the market is breaking down due to delayed rate approvals, litigation costs, excessive regulation, and expensive rebuilding requirements. Insurers are leaving because they can't price risk accurately or predictably. His solution is to stabilize the FAIR plan so that low to moderate risk households can actually move to a private insurer rather than using the FAIR plan. One way he proposes to do so is to enforce a 60-day approval timeline for insurers. That would mean that insurers aren't waiting months or years for rate decisions. Lastly, he wants to require transparency in third-party litigation financing and bring insurers back to California by making it a more predictable place to price risk. Up next, we will talk about Mahan. Mahan has one of the most detailed integrated housing and insurance plans in the entire race. He proposes a 2-year tax holiday to jumpstart construction. He wants to cap fees and taxes on new infill housing projects and block local sales or transfer tax on new construction. He's pushing for more permit status dashboards. That way, everyone can see where projects are getting stuck and know where they sit. He wants cities to process permits in 30 days. If they don't, he'd allow third-party planners and inspectors in on the process to keep things moving along. He also wants statewide standards and incentives for industrialized and factory-built housing. Basically, he wants to make it easier for homes to be built in factories and assembled on site. He's calling for an overhaul of building codes, which he says have led to projects becoming more expensive. He's proposing a condo litigation reform, which would make condos easier to build. On top of all of that, he wants to expand construction workforce training, support office to housing conversions, and support first-time homebuyers that lets the state recoup its investment once a home is sold. Now, insurance is where Mahan stands out. He treats insurance affordability as a housing production problem rather than a consumer finance problem. He believes insurance premiums are not only affecting homeowners, but rather also affecting affordable housing providers and new housing development. His solution is centered on wildfire loss reduction. He wants to create a state office that's devoted to reducing the amount of homes lost by wildfires. One way he plans to do so is to scale up retrofit programs and vegetation management. He wants to target the most cost-effective resilience interventions. In exchange for the state making communities more resilient, he plans to make insurers more accountable for offering affordable coverage. So in essence, it's a two-way deal. The state does its part to reduce risk, and insurers respond by lowering premiums and expanding coverage. Now up next, we have candidate Katie Porter. Katie's housing approach focuses on speed, enforcement, and state resources. She wants to lower development costs, enforce existing housing laws more aggressively, and use state land and infrastructure to unlock projects. She emphasizes getting projects through faster and making sure cities are held accountable when they block housing. She's also talking about using state land strategically to create more housing supply. It's a much shorter published plan than candidates like Mahan or Tom Steyer, but her core idea is clear. Speed up approvals, enforce the law, and use state assets. Now on insurance, her published details are even thinner. From what's available, she acknowledges the insurance crisis and has expressed support for state-backed reinsurance. Essentially, she wants the state to help backstop insurers so that they're more willing to cover higher risk places. She also talks about wildfire hardening and climate-linked insurance stress. Okay, up next, we will talk about billionaire candidate Tom Steyer. Now, Steyer says that he will build 1 million homes in the next 4 years. Now, here's how he plans on doing so. He wants to make building easier across all housing types, streamline housing finance, modernize the Surplus Land Act, so public land can be used for housing, use long-term ground leases on public land to lower the upfront cost of development, enforce existing housing laws, expand the pro-housing designation program that rewards cities for actually building, standardize or scale fees so that they're not killing projects, offset infill infrastructure costs, and use industrialized construction to lower costs. He also supports using California's purchasing power to support prefab and modular construction. If the state buys in bulk, then theoretically this will drive down costs. He specifically mentions wanting to buy ADU material in bulk. Furthermore, he talks about creating a state revolving loan program and use Cal HFA aggressively to unlock stalled mixed income developments. Overall, this is a huge supply and public investment approach. Steyer is talking about using state financing, state land, and state purchasing power to reshape the housing market. Steyer's insurance plan is less about deregulation and more about resilience and system reform. He believes climate change is driving up insurance costs and that markets won't work without insurance. He plans on making communities more resilient. To do so, he wants to make major polluters pay. Also, he suggests using better data to model risk. Work with the Department of Insurance to fix broken risk pools. Create state-approved disaster resilient blueprints. That way, local governments aren't creating redundant mandates. Use industrialized construction capacity to guarantee faster disaster recovery. And make it harder for institutional investors to crowd out families after being displaced. And now moving on to the last candidate, Antonio Villaraigosa. Villaraigosa is focused heavily on home ownership and first-time homebuyers. He has a proposal for a $25 billion bond. This will be used to build affordable housing and create new home ownership pathways. He also created a second mortgage program for first-time homebuyers. Essentially, the state provides a second loan to make home ownership more affordable. He wants to modernize CEQA so that's not blocking housing, use public land for housing developments, and fast-track housing projects. He's also talking about expanding workforce training and construction. His housing platform is very home ownership focused. He wants to help people buy homes rather than just rent them forever. He's talking about using public financing and public land in order to make that happen. On insurance, Villaraigosa recognizes the fair plan problem. He's acknowledged the crisis and has mentioned the need to address it, but he doesn't have a step-by-step plan on how to do so on his platforms. The only things that I could definitively find is that he's mentioned the need to address the wildfire risks and the insurance availability. Now that we've gone through each candidate separately, let's do a side-by-side comparison. Every single candidate agrees that California needs to build more housing. The only difference is how. Bianco is the closest to deregulation and CEQA elimination. Hilton is mostly about entry-level ownership plus cost controls and a regulatory freeze. Mahan is process reform, industrialized housing, and cost discipline. Becerra is state-led delivery, fee reform. Villaraigosa is homeownership finance, CEQA modernization, and public land bonds. Porter is speed, enforcement, and state land. Steyer is large-scale financing reform, public land, modular production, and state investment. Now, Villaraigosa and Hilton are clearest about building homes for first-time homebuyers. Similarly, Mahan also talks about reviving condos and starter homes. Becerra leans towards affordability at scale rather than dedicated ownership. Porter is more focused on lowering development costs. Steyer blends ownership access with public financing and anti-corporation investment. On insurance, the candidates can really be separated into three separate categories. The first one are the market predictability candidates. Bianco and Hilton fit in here. Their goal is simply to bring insurers back by making the market more predictable and less hostile. Mahan also falls into this camp. The next category is resilience first candidates. Steyer and Mahan fit this category best. They're focused on wildfire hardening, risk reduction, and making communities more insurable. Bianco and Porter also talk about hardening. And lastly, we have the direct rate or public backstopping candidates. Becerra clearly fits here with his rate freeze rhetoric. Porter nods in this direction with state-backed reinsurance. Lastly here, we're going to quickly go over what's missing and what to watch for. Keep in mind that different candidates here have different granularity when it comes to their plans. That doesn't necessarily mean that candidates don't care, but rather their public record isn't clearly defined yet. For many that do have plans, such as Villaraigosa's bond and second mortgage program, Steyer's financing architecture, Mahan's tax holiday, Becerra's emergency model, or Hilton's loan programs, these could require legislative approval, budget capacity, or major administrative execution. So when you hear about these plans, understand that they're really goals and they're not necessarily actions. Ultimately, you have to think about your priorities. Do you think California's housing problem is caused by overregulation or underinvestment? Do you want a governor who will deregulate or use state financing? Do you think insurers need more freedom to price risk? Or do you think the state needs to step in and control costs? There's no objectively correct answer to those questions. The questions were meant to guide you so that you can align most with what candidate speaks to you. Okay, so to end things out here, we have 7 candidates and 7 different approaches. The question here isn't about what's best, but rather what you think aligns most with what California needs. Thank you so much if you stayed and watched to the end of this video. It would mean the world to me if you could like, comment, and subscribe. What supports me even more is if you share this with someone that you think would like this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.